Felix hides a painful secret, but Hyunjin notices every crack. A heartfelt story of trust, fear, and a bond tested by silence. The sharp crash of broken glass echoed through the empty practice room. Felix. Hyunjin's voice cut through the silence as he rushed forward. For a split second, Felix froze. The shattered water bottle lay on the floor, water spreading across the polished wood like a silver river under the fluorescent lights. His hands trembled uncontrollably. Not from the accident. From fear, a fear he had spent months hiding. "I'm fine," Felix said immediately. The lie came out too fast, too practiced. Hyunjin stopped a few steps away, breathing hard. His dark eyes scanned Felix carefully, lingering on the pale color of his face and the way his fingers curled into fists. "You don't look fine." I said I'm okay. Bent down to clean the mess before Hyunjin could see the slight shake running through his arms. The room smelled faintly of sweat, dust, and the rain falling outside. Water tapped against the large windows, creating a rhythm that somehow made the silence between them even heavier. Hyunjin remained standing, watching, waiting. Felix hated that nobody noticed details the way Hyunjin did, nobody paid attention to small changes like him. And right now Felix desperately wished Hyunjin would stop looking, because if he looked long enough, he would find the truth, a truth Felix wasn't ready to share, not yet, maybe not ever. The practice ended an hour later. The building was nearly empty when Felix slipped into the hallway alone. His footsteps echoed softly. His body felt exhausted. Lately, exhaustion had become normal. No matter how much he slept, he woke up tired. No matter how much he smiled, he felt drained, and no matter how hard he tried to hide it. The secret kept growing heavier. His phone vibrated, a message appeared. "Are you going home, Hyunjin?" Felix stared at the screen for several seconds, then typed a simple reply, "Yeah." Another message arrived immediately, "Liar." Felix stopped walking, his heartbeat accelerated. The hallway suddenly felt colder. "What, you never take this route when you're going home?" Felix closed his eyes. Of course, Hyunjin had noticed. Again, sometimes Felix wondered if Hyunjin possessed some impossible ability to read him. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. A second later, footsteps approached from behind. Felix didn't need to turn around, he already knew. Hyunjin stopped beside him, neither spoke. The rain outside grew heavier. Eventually Hyunjin sighed. "You've been avoiding everyone." Looked away. "Yes." Answer came instantly, without hesitation, without judgment, just certainty. Hyunjin leaned against the wall. "You barely eat." "I eat." "You barely sleep." "I sleep." "You smile less." Swallowed. "When you think nobody's looking, you stare at the floor like you're carrying the entire world by yourself." The words struck harder than they should have because they were true, painfully true. For months, Felix had become an expert at pretending everything was normal, pretending nothing hurt, pretending he wasn't drowning beneath expectations, fear, and a loneliness he couldn't explain. Yet somehow, Hyunjin saw through all of it. "Why do you care so much?" Felix whispered. The question escaped before he could stop it. For a moment, Hyunjin seemed surprised, then something softened in his expression. "Because you're important to me." Hallway became silent. Rain tapped against glass. A distant elevator hummed somewhere below. But Felix heard none of it, only those words, "because you're important to me." His chest tightened dangerously, not because he disliked hearing it, but because he liked hearing it too much. The truth was complicated. Hyunjin had become his safest place, the first person he wanted to talk to, the first person he searched for in crowded rooms, the first person who could make terrible days feel manageable, and that terrified him. Because people could leave, people changed, people got tired. Felix knew that better than anyone, so he built walls, he hid feelings, he carried pain alone. It was safer that way, at least that was what he kept telling himself. "Felix." His name sounded gentle in Hyunjin's voice. "Look at me." Slowly Felix did, their eyes met, and suddenly every defense felt weaker. "Whatever you're hiding," Hyunjin said quietly, "you don't have to carry it alone." The words nearly broke him, nearly. Felix forced a smile, a small one, fragile. "You worry too much." Hyunjin stared, clearly unconvinced, but he didn't push further. Instead, he stepped closer and lightly nudged Felix's shoulder. "Maybe." A faint laugh escaped Felix, the first genuine one all day. For a moment things felt normal, warm, safe. Then Felix's phone rang, the screen lit up, an unfamiliar number. His blood instantly ran cold. Hyunjin noticed, the smile vanished from Felix's face, his shoulders stiffened. His breathing changed, everything changed, and Hyunjin saw it happen. "Felix." The phone continued ringing once, twice, 3 times. Felix stared at the screen like it was a loaded weapon. Eventually, with shaking fingers, he declined the call. The hallway fell silent again, but the warmth was gone, completely gone. Hyunjin frowned. Who was that? No one. Lie, a terrible one. Felix started walking away fast, too fast. "Felix, I'm tired. I want to go home." His voice cracked. The sound stopped Hyunjin instantly. For the first time that night, Hyunjin saw genuine fear in Felix's eyes, not stress, not exhaustion, fear, raw and real, the kind people carried when they were running from something or someone. And suddenly Hyunjin understood one thing: the secret Felix had been hiding was much bigger than he had imagined. As Felix disappeared down the corridor, rain pouring beyond the windows, Hyunjin remained standing alone. His heart felt uneasy. Because no matter how hard Felix tried to hide it, something was wrong, very wrong. And for the first time, Hyunjin realized that protecting Felix might require uncovering a truth neither of them was ready to face. Felix barely remembered how he got home that night. The city lights blurred past the car window, streaks of gold and white melting into the darkness beyond the rain-soaked streets. His phone rested face down on his lap, but he could still feel its presence like a ticking clock. The unknown number had not called again. Yet that was somehow worse, because silence meant waiting, and waiting always made him imagine the worst. When he finally entered his apartment, the familiar scent of laundry detergent and coffee greeted him. Usually it was comforting, tonight it felt empty. He dropped his bag near the couch and stood motionless in the dark. The rain continued outside, soft, relentless. His phone suddenly vibrated. Felix's heart jumped. For one terrifying second he thought the number had returned. Instead a message appeared. "Did you get home safely, Hyunjin?" Felix stared at the words. A small warmth spread through his chest despite everything. He typed back, "Yeah." 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Eventually another message arrived. "You're still lying." Felix couldn't help laughing quietly, even through the fear, even through the exhaustion. Hyunjin was impossible. "What makes you think that?" The reply came almost instantly. "Because I know you." The words hit harder than they should have. Felix sat down slowly. The apartment remained dark except for the glow of the city beyond the windows. For several moments he simply stared at the message. "Because I know you." Maybe that was the problem. Hyunjin knew him too well, enough to notice every forced smile, every awkward laugh, every moment he pretended to be okay. Felix typed a response, then erased it, typed another, deleted that too. Finally he put the phone aside. Some things were too difficult to explain through text, especially when he wasn't sure how to explain them to himself. Hours later sleep finally came, but it brought no peace. The dream began with a ringing phone, the same unknown number. Again, the sound echoed endlessly through darkness, then footsteps, someone approaching, closer, closer, closer. Felix tried to move, he couldn't. The darkness shifted, and suddenly he wasn't alone anymore. A figure stood in front of him, waiting, watching, its face hidden. The phone continued ringing, louder, louder, louder. Felix woke with a gasp. His entire body was shaking, morning sunlight filtered through the curtains. His heart hammered painfully against his ribs. For several seconds he remained frozen, trying to convince himself it had only been a dream. Then he noticed his phone. 3 missed calls, same number. The blood drained from his face. "No." His whisper sounded fragile in the empty room. The calls had happened while he slept, which meant this wasn't over, not even close. A knock suddenly sounded at the door. Felix nearly jumped. His pulse exploded. Another knock, then a familiar voice. "Felix." Hyunjin. Relief flooded him so quickly his knees almost gave out. He crossed the apartment and opened the door. Hyunjin stood outside holding 2 cups of coffee. His expression immediately changed when he saw Felix. The smile vanished, concern replaced it. "You look terrible." Felix tried to laugh, it didn't work. Hyunjin stepped inside. The smell of fresh coffee filled the apartment. Normally Felix would have teased him about showing up uninvited. Today he simply sat down, too tired to pretend, too exhausted to argue. Hyunjin placed one of the drinks in front of him, then sat across from him. Silence stretched between them, comfortable, at least for Hyunjin. For Felix it felt dangerous, because the longer they sat there, the harder it became to maintain his walls. Eventually Hyunjin spoke. "Phone call." Felix's fingers tightened around the cup. "What about it? You were scared." "No, Felix." The simple way Hyunjin said his name made lying feel impossible, almost. Felix looked away. Outside, clouds drifted across the morning sky, cars moved through wet streets below, life continued as normal, yet his own world felt increasingly unstable. "Sometimes," Hyunjin said quietly, "people think they're protecting others by keeping secrets." Felix swallowed. "But all they're really doing is carrying the pain alone." The words settled heavily in the room. Felix stared at the coffee. Steam rose slowly into the air. He wanted to speak, wanted to explain. Wanted to finally tell someone the truth. But fear remained stronger. Fear always won. At least until now. A sudden buzz interrupted the silence. Both looked down. Felix's phone vibrated across the table. The screen lit up unknown number again. The room instantly felt colder. Hyunjin saw Felix go pale, saw his hands begin to tremble, saw genuine panic appear in his eyes. Without thinking, Hyunjin reached across the table and gently placed a hand over Felix's. The contact was warm, steady. Real Felix looked up. For a moment neither spoke. The phone continued vibrating, buzz, 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 then silence. The call ended, neither moved. Felix, Hyunjin said softly, his voice held no pressure, no judgment, only concern. You don't have to tell me everything. Felix's eyes burned unexpectedly. You don't, Hyunjin shook his head. No, answer surprised him. I don't need every detail. Hyunjin offered a small smile. But I need to know whether you're okay. Kindness in those words nearly shattered the last of Felix's defenses, because lately, nobody had asked that, not really. Everyone saw Felix the performer, Felix the smiling friend, Felix the dependable one. Very few people looked beyond that. Hyunjin always did. And that was exactly why Felix was afraid, because if Hyunjin learned the entire truth, he might see Felix differently. The possibility hurt more than Felix wanted to admit. Outside, sunlight briefly broke through the clouds. The apartment brightened. For the first time in days, Felix felt something loosen inside his chest. Not peace, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. He looked at Hyunjin, really looked at him, at the patience in his eyes, the concern, the unwavering presence. And quietly, almost too quietly to hear, Felix spoke. I'm trying. Hyunjin smiled, a genuine one this time. I know. The first time in months, Felix believed someone actually did.
For the rest of the morning, neither of them mentioned the phone calls again. Instead, Hyunjin stayed. Not because Felix asked him to, and not because he had any particular reason. He simply stayed. The kind of staying that filled an empty room with warmth without demanding anything in return. They drank coffee, talked about meaningless things, a funny mistake during practice. A song stuck in Hyunjin's head, an argument about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. For a while, Felix almost forgot the fear sitting quietly in the corner of his mind. Almost. Then his phone vibrated again. The sound was small, barely noticeable, yet Felix's entire body tensed instantly. Hyunjin saw it, of course he did. Felix picked up the phone. This time it wasn't a call, it was a message. His chest tightened. Unknown number. The text contained only 6 words. You can't hide forever, Felix. The world seemed to stop. The apartment vanished. The sunlight vanished. Everything vanished except those words. His breathing became shallow, fast. A cold sensation crawled down his spine. Felix. Hyunjin's voice sounded distant. The message blurred as panic flooded his vision. No, 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 not now, not after all this time. His hands shook so badly the phone nearly slipped from his grip. Before he could stop himself, Hyunjin noticed. His eyes narrowed. What's wrong? Nothing. Answer came automatically, instinctively, a defense mechanism built from years of hiding. But this time even Felix knew it sounded ridiculous. Hyunjin slowly held out his hand. Show me. Felix froze. The room became silent. Every second stretched endlessly. He could refuse. He should refuse. That would be safer, wouldn't it? Yet as he looked into Hyunjin's eyes, something inside him began to crumble. The exhaustion, the loneliness, the endless pretending. Maybe he was simply too tired to keep carrying everything alone. With trembling fingers, Felix handed over the phone. Hyunjin read the message. The smile vanished from his face immediately. What is this? Felix looked away. Rain clouds were gathering outside again, dark and heavy, just like the secret he had buried for months. It started a long time ago. His voice sounded unfamiliar, small, fragile. Hyunjin remained silent, listening, waiting. I thought it would stop. The words came slowly, like opening a wound. At first it was only messages. His throat tightened. Then calls. Hyunjin's expression darkened. Someone has been doing this for months. Felix nodded. A painful silence followed. The reality sounded worse when spoken aloud, because it was worse. For months he had lived with constant anxiety. Every unknown number, every unexpected message, every notification, each one carrying the possibility of another threat. And yet he had told nobody, not a single person. Why didn't you say anything? Felix laughed bitterly. The sound held no humor. Because I thought I could handle it. Answer felt pathetic now, but it was true. He had always tried to handle everything alone, always, until the burden became too heavy. Hyunjin lowered the phone. For a moment he looked angry, not at Felix, at the situation, at whoever was responsible, at the fact that Felix had suffered in silence. Then his expression softened. You don't have to be strong every second. Felix felt something painful twist inside his chest. I know, but the truth was, he didn't know, not really. Somewhere along the way, he had convinced himself that strength meant silence, that asking for help meant failure, that vulnerability was weakness. Hyunjin seemed to understand exactly what he was thinking. You trust me, right? Felix looked up, their eyes met. The question felt deceptively simple. Do you trust me? The answer came immediately, without hesitation, without doubt. Yes. Hyunjin smiled, a small smile, but a real one. Then let me help. The words settled deeply inside him. For months he had carried this alone. For months he had been fighting shadows by himself. And now, someone was offering to stand beside him. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. The realization was almost overwhelming. Before Felix could respond, another vibration filled the room. Both froze. The phone. Again, a new message appeared. This time there were only 3 words. Look outside now. The color drained from Felix's face. Hyunjin immediately stood. Showed him the screen. A terrible feeling settled over both of them. Slowly, they turned toward the apartment window. Outside, people moved along the sidewalk below. Cars passed. Rain began falling once more. At first, everything looked normal. Then Felix saw it. A figure standing across the street, completely still, not moving, not leaving, just watching the building, watching his apartment, watching him. The distance made it impossible to see the person's face clearly, but somehow that made it worse. A chill swept through the room. Neither spoke. Rain intensified. The figure remained motionless. And for the first time since this nightmare had begun, Felix realized something horrifying. Whoever had been sending those messages wasn't far away. They were already here. And they knew exactly where to find him. Felix couldn't move. The figure across the street remained perfectly still beneath the rain. Cars passed between them. People walked by carrying umbrellas. Yet somehow that person never seemed to disappear, like a shadow anchored to the sidewalk, watching, waiting. The apartment suddenly felt much smaller, much quieter. Beside him, Hyunjin's expression hardened. Stay here. Immediately, Felix grabbed his wrist. No. Answer came out sharper than intended. Hyunjin turned toward him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Felix realized how tightly he was holding on and slowly loosened his grip. I mean, he swallowed. Don't go. Concern in his voice was impossible to hide. Hyunjin looked surprised, then something gentle appeared in his eyes. I'm not going to do anything reckless. Felix wasn't convinced. Hyunjin had many good qualities. Patience was not always one of them, especially when someone he cared about was involved. The rain continued striking the glass. When Felix looked back toward the street, the figure was still there, motionless, almost unnaturally so. Then a bus passed, only for a second, just enough to block the view. When it moved away, the figure was gone. Felix's heart dropped. Gone, as if they had never been there. As if the entire thing had been a hallucination, but the messages were real, the calls were real, the fear was real, and the fact that someone knew where he lived was very, very real. Hyunjin immediately stepped closer to the window. His eyes scanned the street. Nothing. Only rain, only strangers hurrying home, only the ordinary world continuing as if nothing had happened. What did they look like? He asked quietly. Felix shook his head. I couldn't tell. Answer frustrated him. Everything about this situation frustrated him. Months of messages, months of anxiety, months of uncertainty, yet he still knew almost nothing about the person behind it all. It felt like fighting a ghost. Eventually, Hyunjin turned away from the window. His expression remained serious. We need to tell someone. Felix already knew that, but hearing it aloud made the situation feel frighteningly real, because telling someone meant admitting he couldn't solve it himself, admitting he needed help. Admitting this had become bigger than him. The thought made his stomach tighten. I know. His voice barely rose above a whisper. For a moment, silence settled over the apartment. The rain softened. The clouds outside drifted slowly across the afternoon sky. Then unexpectedly, Hyunjin sat down beside him, not across from him, beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The simple gesture felt strangely comforting. Felix hadn't realized how tense he was until now, how exhausted, how alone. Hyunjin leaned back against the couch. You know what bothers me most? Felix glanced toward him. What? A sigh escaped Hyunjin. That you've been carrying this by yourself. The words landed heavily, because they were true, painfully true. Felix lowered his gaze. The wooden floor blurred slightly, not because of tears, at least not yet. I didn't want anyone to worry. Hyunjin laughed softly, a tired laugh. That's impossible. Felix frowned. What is worrying about you? Answer came immediately, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Felix looked up. Hyunjin smiled faintly. You think people care less than they actually do. Something about that observation struck deeply, because maybe Hyunjin was right. Maybe Felix had spent so long protecting others from his problems that he'd forgotten people sometimes wanted to help, wanted to stay, wanted to share the weight. The realization felt uncomfortable, but also strangely hopeful. Outside, the rain finally stopped. Sunlight began breaking through the clouds. Golden light spilled into the apartment. For a brief moment, everything looked warmer, softer, almost peaceful. Then Felix's phone rang again. Both froze. The screen lit up. Unknown number. The familiar dread returned instantly. This time neither looked away, neither pretended. The phone continued ringing once, twice, 3 times. Hyunjin met Felix's eyes. "You don't have to answer." Felix stared at the screen, his pulse thundered in his ears. For months he had ignored every call, every message, every attempt at contact. And where had that got him? Nowhere. The fear remained. The uncertainty remained. Everything remained. Slowly, Felix inhaled, then exhaled. And before he could lose his nerve, he answered. The apartment became silent. No voice came from the other end, only breathing, slow, quiet, almost impossible to hear. A chill crawled across Felix's skin. "Who is this?" he asked. Nothing. The breathing continued. Hyunjin watched him carefully, every muscle in his body tense. Felix swallowed. "Why are you doing this?" Still nothing. Then a voice, soft, distorted, barely recognizable. "You finally answered." The word sent ice through Felix's veins. Every instinct screamed at him to hang up, to run, to escape. Yet he remained frozen. The voice continued, calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "You shouldn't trust everyone around you." Felix's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" Silence. A few seconds passed, then a quiet chuckle emerged from the speaker. The sound felt wrong, unnatural. "Find out soon." Line disconnected. Just like that, gone. The apartment remained completely silent. Felix stared at the phone, his hand trembling, his breathing uneven. Across from him, Hyunjin's face had gone pale. Because he had heard every word, and neither of them could ignore the implication. The caller hadn't just been watching Felix. They knew about the people around him too. And somewhere beneath the fear growing inside him, another feeling emerged, a terrible question. What if the person wasn't trying to frighten him? What if they were trying to warn him? Felix looked at Hyunjin, his closest friend, the person he trusted most. And for the first time since this nightmare began, doubt slipped quietly into the room, small. Unwanted, but impossible to completely ignore. The silence after the call felt heavier than any argument. Felix sat motionless on the couch, his phone still in his hand. The caller's words echoed endlessly inside his mind. "You shouldn't trust everyone around you." A simple sentence. Yet it had planted something dangerous. Doubt. Felix hated it immediately, because there was one person in the world he didn't want to doubt. Hyunjin. The thought alone felt wrong, unfair. But fear had a way of twisting thoughts into something darker. Hyunjin remained standing near the window. His jaw was tight, his expression unreadable. Eventually he spoke. "We're reporting this." Felix looked up. "What?" "This has gone too far." His voice was firm, certain. For once, Felix didn't argue. Part of him wanted to, the old part, the part that insisted on handling everything alone. But that part was exhausted, and honestly, he was scared, more scared than he wanted to admit, so he nodded. "Okay." Answer surprised both of them. For a moment, Hyunjin simply stared. Then relief briefly crossed his face. A tiny expression, gone almost instantly, yet Felix noticed. Hyunjin had been worried, really worried. The realization tightened something inside his chest. Hours later, evening settled over the city. The sky darkened into deep shades of blue and gray. Streetlights flickered on one by one. The apartment glowed softly beneath warm lamps. Despite everything, Hyunjin still hadn't left. Not once had he checked the time. Not once had he hinted about going home. He simply stayed, as if leaving Felix alone wasn't an option. The thought was comforting, maybe too comforting. Around 9 o'clock, Felix finally stood from the couch. "I'll make dinner." Hyunjin blinked. "Cooking?" Felix narrowed his eyes. "I can cook. That's not what worries me." Felix grabbed a cushion and threw it at him. Hyunjin laughed for the first time all day, a genuine laugh. The sound briefly lifted the tension hanging over the apartment. For a few minutes, everything almost felt normal again, almost. Then Felix entered the kitchen and froze. A folded piece of paper sat on the counter. His heart stopped. He was certain it hadn't been there before. Slowly he approached. The paper remained perfectly still beneath the overhead light. A chill ran through him. "Hyunjin." His voice sounded strange, too quiet, too tense. Immediately Hyunjin appeared behind him. "What happened?" Felix pointed. Both stared at the paper. The apartment suddenly felt colder, much colder. Hyunjin carefully stepped forward, his expression darkened. "Was this here earlier?" Felix shook his head. "No." Answer came instantly because he would have noticed, he was sure of it. Hyunjin picked up the note, unfolded it, read it, then went completely pale. A feeling of dread spread through Felix. "What does it say?" For several seconds Hyunjin didn't answer, then slowly handed over the paper. Felix looked down. Only one sentence was written. "You're finally telling him the truth." Good. The world seemed to tilt. Felix stared at the words again, and again, and again. His hands began shaking. The paper crumpled slightly beneath his grip. No, no, no. How could someone have placed this here? The doors had been locked, the windows closed. Hyunjin had been with him all day. The realization was horrifying. Whoever was behind this wasn't simply watching from a distance anymore, somehow. It had gotten closer, much closer. Hyunjin immediately checked the apartment, every room, every window, every lock. Nothing seemed disturbed. Nothing seemed broken. No signs of forced entry, yet the note existed. A fact neither of them could explain. When Hyunjin returned to the living room, Felix was still staring at the paper. His face had gone pale. Felix. No response. Felix. This time he looked up. The fear in his eyes hit Hyunjin harder than expected. Because it wasn't panic anymore, it was something deeper, something colder. For the first time, Felix looked genuinely overwhelmed. I don't understand. His voice cracked. The admission seemed to cost him something. Months of fear, months of uncertainty. Months of trying to stay strong, and now the cracks were finally showing. Hyunjin sat beside him immediately, close enough that their shoulders touched. You don't have to understand everything tonight. Felix laughed weakly. I'd like to understand something. Attempt at humor was fragile, but Hyunjin appreciated it anyway. A small smile appeared, then disappeared, because neither could ignore reality. Someone was watching. Someone knew things they shouldn't know. Someone wanted Felix afraid. The question was why. Hours passed. Eventually midnight arrived. The city outside grew quieter. Most apartment windows went dark. The streets emptied. The world seemed to fall asleep, but sleep felt impossible. Felix sat near the window, staring into the darkness beyond the glass. His reflection stared back, tired, anxious, different somehow. Behind him, Hyunjin rested on the couch, not asleep, just watching, making sure Felix wasn't alone. The realization warmed him more than he expected. Then suddenly, a light appeared across the street. In an apartment building facing his. One window, one room, one light, nothing unusual, except for the fact that someone stood behind the glass, watching, directly toward Felix's apartment, directly toward him. The figure never moved, never looked away. A terrible chill swept through him. Slowly, Felix stood, his pulse accelerating. Hyunjin. Immediately, Hyunjin looked up, pointed toward the building across the street. Hyunjin followed his gaze and froze. The figure remained there, motionless, watching. The distance hid every detail except one. The silhouette looked familiar, painfully familiar, as if they had seen it before, somewhere. Recently, neither spoke, neither breathed. Then the figure slowly raised one hand and waved.
The figure's hand remained raised behind the illuminated window, waving, slow, deliberate, almost friendly. Yet nothing about the moment felt friendly. Felix's heart pounded so hard it hurt. Beside him, Hyunjin had gone completely still. Neither spoke, neither looked away. Then, without warning, the light in the opposite apartment switched off. Darkness swallowed the figure, gone just like that. The room fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic below. For several seconds, Felix simply stood there. His thoughts racing, his fear growing, and then something unexpected happened. The fear stopped, not completely, but enough for him to realize something important. He couldn't keep living like this, couldn't spend every day waiting for another message, another call, another shadow, another threat. He was tired, not physically, emotionally, tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of letting an invisible stranger control his life. Slowly, he turned away from the window. Hyunjin immediately noticed the change in his expression. "What are you thinking?" Felix took a deep breath, then another. Finally, he answered, "Done hiding." Words surprised even him. Yet once spoken, they felt right. For months he had been trapped inside fear. Now he wanted answers, real answers. The following morning, everything changed. With Hyunjin beside him, Felix handed over every message, every call record, every screenshot, every detail he had hidden. The process took hours, longer than expected. Because there had been far more incidents than anyone realized. When everything was finally collected, a pattern began to emerge, one that nobody had noticed before. Several messages had been sent from locations near places Felix visited regularly, practice rooms, cafes, parking areas, buildings near schedules only a limited number of people knew about. The investigation moved forward quickly after that. Days passed, then weeks. The uncertainty remained difficult, but something else had changed. Felix no longer faced it alone. Whenever anxiety threatened to overwhelm him, Hyunjin was there, not with perfect solutions, not with dramatic speeches, just present, steady, reliable, constant. Sometimes that was enough. One evening, nearly 3 weeks later, the truth finally surfaced. The person behind the messages wasn't a mysterious enemy from Felix's past, nor was it someone inside his closest circle. It was an obsessive individual who had built an unhealthy fixation around him over time. Someone who convinced themselves they understood him, someone who believed they deserved access to his life, someone who crossed every boundary because they mistook obsession for connection. When the situation was finally stopped, Felix felt something unexpected, relief, of course, but also sadness, because months of fear had stolen things from him, sleep, peace, trust in his own instincts. Yet they hadn't taken everything. They hadn't taken the people who cared about him. And that realization mattered most. Several weeks later, Felix stood alone on the rooftop of a building just after sunset. The city stretched endlessly before him. Golden lights sparkled beneath the evening sky. A gentle breeze moved through his hair. For the first time in a very long time, his chest felt light, not perfect, not completely healed, but lighter. The rooftop door opened behind him. He didn't need to turn around, he already knew. Hyunjin stepped beside him. For a while, neither spoke. They simply watched the sunset together. Comfortable in the silence, eventually Hyunjin glanced toward him. "You seem different." Felix smiled, a genuine smile, the kind he hadn't worn in months. "Maybe I am." Hyunjin nodded thoughtfully. "I think so." Sky slowly deepened into shades of orange and purple. The city below continued moving, people chasing dreams, people carrying worries, people searching for answers, just like everyone else. Felix leaned against the railing. "You know," he said quietly, "I thought keeping everything to myself would protect everyone." Hyunjin laughed softly, looked toward the horizon. The memory of those fearful months felt distant now, still painful but distant. "It just made me lonely." Answer hung between them, honest, simple, true. Hyunjin smiled, then gently nudged his shoulder. "Good thing you finally figured that out." Felix laughed, a real laugh, warm and effortless. The sound disappeared into the evening wind. For a moment, neither spoke again. They didn't need to. Some bonds weren't built through dramatic promises. They were built through countless small moments, through staying, through listening, through choosing someone again and again when things became difficult. As darkness settled over the city, Felix realized something he wished he had understood much sooner. Fear grows strongest in silence, but trust grows strongest when shared. And no matter how dark those months had been, they had led him to one undeniable truth. He never had to carry everything alone. With that realization warming his heart, Felix watched the final rays of sunlight disappear beyond the horizon, knowing that this chapter of fear had finally ended, and a brighter one was just beginning.